heard that beautifully defined the other day, is that, obviously the technical term, or the psychological term, is psychological safety, when actually someone phrased it as psychological freedom. And it's a reiteration of the words, but there's a safe place and then there's a place of freedom, and I really love the difference in that. Because safe sometimes can be seen as a little bit risk averse, whilst if I'm free and I've got this sense of freedom, then it's okay if I come back to vulnerability or take a couple of risks, because I'm free to do that because people trust me. I really enjoyed that difference in the phrasing.
Yeah. What separates the good from the truly high performing? In this episode, I sit down with Chris Webb, a strategic mind behind some of Australia's most successful professional and Olympic sporting programs. With 15 plus years at the elite level, Chris isn't just about talking theory. He's lived and breathed high performance from the inside out. We talk leadership that actually works, not just those buzzwords. Chris breaks down the 3 essentials that every leader needs to master: having a clear and aligned vision, the self-awareness to own your weaknesses, and most importantly, a genuine care for the people you lead. This chat is full of practical gold. Why chasing significance beats chasing success, how to bounce back from setbacks without blaming others, the underestimated power of daily habits and consistency, why treating people how they need to be treated is a game changer. So whether you're leading a team, a business, or just trying to lead yourself better, this one's for you. Tap in, learn from the best, and apply it to your own game. I'm Ian Hawkins, and this is Sport is Life. The purpose of sport, as I see it, is to see your vision become a reality. Find your voice, create strong connections, and learn to trust your body. Hey Chris, how you going?
G'day, mate. Really well, thanks. And you?
Yeah, going well. You've spent a bit of time with the Wallabies over the years. It must be heartening to see them seem to be steering in the right direction. They got beat in the weekend, but they had a good win the week before at altitude.
Yeah, you did right. Fantastic to see the boys are really playing for each other, and obviously the group as well. And they just look as though they're enjoying their footy. No mean feat to win up there in the high belt, at whether it is Loftus or Eden Pretoria or Johannesburg. I've been up there plenty of times and played plenty of times. I think I only ever won one game. I think it might have been with the Super Rugby team way back when, but for the guys to play there and win and beat the Springboks, unbelievable. So no, they'd be pretty happy watching the game on the weekend as well. It looked as though the conditions were pretty tough, and had a couple of unfortunate injuries which probably put them on the back foot, and then they had to, and they lost them early too, which is disappointing. But the Springboks, consistent, right? They're always going to be pretty wounded after a decent loss in their own home patch. So,
Yeah.
it's been some great rugby, actually. And then to watch the RGs pick the ABs in Buenos Aires was really good. So, yeah, great balance in the competition this year.
Yeah, really good to see. We're going to get to the work you do in performance. What is the impact of altitude? Just how badly does it impact people that aren't used to it?
Oh, listen, it is a bit of a myth, and it's not. If you're not used to it, you do feel it under pressure, and when you're fatigued, it sort of sucks out of you a bit quicker. You try to mentally block it out, but it does have an impact. I think there's lots of different schools of thought of how you adapt to that, and we've been involved long enough to trial them, most of them, and whether you go down on the coast first, whether that's Cape Town or Durban, and then come up late, or they reckon it takes about 7 to 10 days to adjust properly to it. But if you're not used to it, like all things, unison change presents risk, right? So it does have an impact at the back end of the game, and if you're not as conditioned as you possibly could be, feel it a lot quicker. And things like, for whatever reason, the ball tends to go 10 or 20 metres further if you hit it in a sweet spot.
Yeah.
Just little things like that you're a bit of a wow factor when you're up there.
Yeah, right. So you do think it's... sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I think too when you play in places like Loftus Versfeld, Victoria and Ellis Park, that the Hovelt fan is a proper a crazy beast. That on top of altitude and big blokes running at you and balls going 10 minutes and these Afrikaners and Africans crammed in, screaming at the tops of their lungs. It's quite an intimidating, imposing environment. So I don't know if it's altitude or the rest that scares the shit out of it.
But you do think there is a fair bit of mental adjustment that needs to happen as well?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, you try not to talk about it, or you try to talk about it in a positive frame and prepare really, really well. And but under fatigue at the back end of a game, mate, you feel it.
Yeah. What was your sporting journey? What did you grow up playing?
When I was a kid, I played rugby league and rugby union. I grew up in a little country town and played both. Our school, little primary school we went to, was very strong in hockey, so we played a bit of hockey as well. Then I went to school in Sydney. It was mainly rugby, a little bit of basketball, a little bit of cricket in the summer, but I'd like to say I loved it and played it poorly. So,
like most of us.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but no, that's mainly rugby league and rugby union as a young bloke, and then more rugby, obviously, in my teenhoods and adulthoods.
So you would you call yourself as like a sports nut, or is more just something you did?
No, I wouldn't say I was a sports nut. It was just something I did, and growing up in the bush, that was your social outlet, right? And obviously, as a kid, a bit older, but didn't have the opportunities that young kids have now. Definitely in the city, so sport and the rural life was what we did. No, I wouldn't say I was a sport nut. I love being part of it, and I love the whole connection piece and hanging with your mates and doing all that stuff. And then, obviously, when you get a bit older, you do all those things you shouldn't do as well.
It's all part of it.
That's it. All growing up and learning what it's like to be part of a group. So that's what I love.
Yeah, it's a common theme for people who have come on here. Is like it is such an important part, and maybe we didn't always behave ourselves the best, but always important parts of developing that team connection is those times away from the football field.
Yeah, I think life lessons teach you how to solve problems, right?
Exactly. I love it. So where did you go to in your career? Like, did you go straight out of school into a specific career, or did you have any plan or idea of where you wanted to head?
Yeah, no, I finished school. I went to boarding school in Sydney. Grew up in a rural small town, northern New South Wales, north coast of New South Wales, only 3 or 4 hours north of Sydney. And my dad was a stock and station agent, and that's pretty much what I was pretty keen to do.
Sorry, what was it? Did you say what?
My dad was a stock and station agent, like a livestock auctioneer and property agent, and that's what I was pretty keen to do. I went to Japan for a year as an exchange student with a Rotary program, and had an experience there, and sort of started a Japanese journey. And then I went to university in Queensland and studied in property studies and property law, and became a real estate valuer, and then did my experience, got my registrations and tickets in that, as well as stock and station agency and auctioneering. So I often joke that I did have a real job once. And then in the late 90s, when rugby union was professional, I was involved with, it was all amateur, but junior rep teams at a state and national level. And I think the game realised after a couple of years into professionalism that they obviously needed to look at succession planning and depth charts, and so invested in some young guys that are at the top of their tree in the rep programs, and worked out that they probably needed someone to look after them. And so I got signed as well, running academies and things like that for Rugby Australia, or Australian Rugby Union it was called back then, and New South Wales Rugby and the like. And my journey just sort of progressed there like players did. Some of the guys I worked with, let's say Phil Wall, for example, was in my New South Wales under-19 team, New South Wales 21s, Australian 21s, Waratahs, Wallabies. So those sort of guys, I was fortunate enough to follow their whole career. They then retired and went back into the real world, and for some reason I stayed in it.
You love it. You must love it.
Yeah, definitely. I think you don't work a day in your life if you love what you do, right? So love what you do and do what you love, and I was fortunate enough to work with some high quality people and do a bit of travel and whatnot, and used to joke in Test match rugby I probably had the best seat in the house, sit on the sideline and watch black socks run past. But I was really fortunate, mate, over a long period of time to be involved at that level.
So which part of it really grabbed you? Because what you do now is you coach high performance, but what back, it sounds like you're almost team managing back then, or people managing to a certain degree. So what was the evolution for you? Because no one rarely do people get thrust immediately into high performance. It tends to be a bit of a journey, right?
Yeah, you did right. And I think when I first started, the term high performance didn't really exist. That sort of slowly integrated itself post the Sydney Olympic Games, when the English rowing team came up with this theme around how does the boat go faster, and then wrote a book, and then sort of, I suppose, 2 iterations of Olympics later, that was the birth of the term high performance in sport. So you're right, we probably evolved into it. I think if I look back now and reflect on those early days, it was working with good young people. They're not much older than I wasn't much older than them at the time, but working with good people who were high performers, not that term was around then, who were just ruthless about getting better and better and improving every day and being the best they possibly could. And I suppose that obviously resonated with me when I look back on it. Was I proactively saying, yes, I'm going to work with the best people? No, I think I got thrust into this opportunity. I was like-minded. Like I knew I wasn't good enough to be a rugby player for the Wallabies, but I had this desire to be, the best team manager or best general manager that the Wallabies ever had for a long period of time. Now that might not have been an outcome, but that was what I was striving for. So I think when I look back at it, it was the opportunity to work with high quality people who were a bit like-minded.
Love it. You said there that was the outcome, but it didn't eventuate. I think that's such an important part of not just high performance, but anyone's life, right? Is that the goal's not there because you have to necessarily kick it, but it's there because of who you have to become and how you have to work towards it. So from that experience of having that fairly lofty goal, but not necessarily getting to where it is you wanted to get to, what do you learn from that? What do you take from that to then be able to take forward into all the other sporting teams you've worked with since then?
Yeah, it's an unreal question, mate. I think no one will be perfect. Nothing can be perfect, but it doesn't mean you can't strive for perfection. And I think that's one of the things that I probably learned is that, okay, we might have been 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 this week. What can I possibly do to even get to 10 out of 10? And something else will happen and you drop back to 6 out of 10 for another reason or whatever that is. So it's constantly trying to look back to look forward. I think the other learning is probably important is outcome versus process. So I think we have to accept the outcome And in sport, it's pretty easy. You know, after you play on Saturday, if you play at 5 o'clock, you either win or you lose, or sometimes you draw, but you either win or you lose, so you accept that. But what do you do in the week to ensure you're doing everything you possibly can to be the best you can be? And if everything is prepared and planned well and your execution is right, then more often than not, you'll be successful. Sometimes teams are just better than you are, and then that's the way it is. And sometimes people are better than you are. But if you've done everything you possibly can to not necessarily be successful but be significant, then I think that's something to aim for everybody, really. Fantastic. I think you and I might have talked about this before, but there's a great documentary on a free climber, a guy called Alex Honnold.
Yeah, we
I think the movie's called Free Solo. You know, unbelievable depiction of process versus outcome, because this guy, the outcome is because he's climbing these huge mountains with no ropes, that if he has a mishap or a mistake, then the outcome is he dies. So he's accepted the outcome. He either climbs a mountain or he's no more. So he comes back to process, and that's all his focus is. And I love that story when we talk to young people around how they get better. That's a really great example of forget the outcome, you know, just focus on the process. Saturday night we'll either be singing songs or we'll be having another meeting, but the journey and the enjoyment is what we do from Monday to Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I love what you said there. It's not necessarily about being successful, it's being significant. So how can you differentiate that just for the listeners so they get a full grasp of what you mean by that?
Yeah. So what's an example? Let's just say you're coaching the under-10 soccer team, right? And you're in an area that traditionally has 2 or 3 clubs or towns that are, you know, or areas that are very, very strong and have great coaches and a great pathway, so they'll always be very strong. You're a new club and you're first time kids playing and young coaches and inexperienced coaches. So you're learning along the way, and it might be that, you know, that particular team mightn't win too many games, that they might win 2 or 3 out of a 10, 12 match season. But what's significant is that, one, the kids are learning. They're loving playing soccer because at under 10, this is what it's about. They're developing core skills. And yep, fantastic. We might actually be celebrating a couple of wins, but more importantly, we need to celebrate the time we have together and the connection we have together. So that's significant. For me, if they're your goals and that's what you're trying to achieve, that's significant, because in a 10, 15, 20 team competition, there's only one winner.
Yeah.
And so what's significant is, what are our goals at the start of the season? How are our kids staying in the group, and are they feeling part of something and genuinely connected and you can see when it's significant because the connection's strong. So I think that's the difference. And even at professional level, you and I were just talking off speaker, do a little bit with the Broncos, and currently sitting 5th, but we play the Knights, who I think are 3rd or 4th last on the weekend, and lost a couple of guys. And the reality is that they're not going to make the top 8. So what's significant for them is really important. So I think there is a difference. I used to work for a team in Japan called the Sunwolves that participated in the Super Rugby competition when it expanded, and we were there in the competition for 5 years and probably won 5 games in the whole 5 seasons. Yeah. However, we had the highest rate of attendances. We were muted as everybody's second favourite team. Our merchandise sales were the highest in the whole competition for that whole period of time. That's the significant part, and the boys love feeling part of that. So that's the reality, right?
Mate, that's a great answer, and that's so true for all sporting teams, but even just the individual, right? Like, you can't always be in the next role that you aspire to, but you can build a level of significance where people are sitting up and taking notice because of how you come to what it is you're doing, like how you approach people, all of those things that are about high performance. That is a great description. Similar wording, but I haven't heard it described like that, so that's a cracker. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, no problem.
Do you have in all that time with the Wallabies, do you have like a magic moment where you sort of felt like you really contributed to a result?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I ever had a moment that I remember that I contributed to a result, because in the roles that I did, win, lose or draw, I had to be at my best every time, because the people around you expect that of you, and so I don't remember a specific. I mean, I was fortunate enough to have a lot of success with the Wallabies, but also, we had some failures as well, and you learn plenty from them. I probably remember those harder times more than I do the better times. I think one moment I remember the most, and the bit that I enjoyed the most, and to be fair, it was probably, to answer your question, where I contributed, was actually a couple of moments for two players. So George Gregan and Stephen Larkham had their 100th tests on the same day. We played the Springboks at Accor Stadium, and I was fortunate enough to be around with their career, not the whole 100 tests for both players, but definitely approximately half of those, no doubt. So to be part of that celebration, to be part of those guys' career and celebrate a good win. We won the Mandela Plate against the South Africans in Sydney, and those two men became 100 cappers for the Wallabies. That's probably a really memorable moment, and being part of those two blokes' journeys and successes was really special.
Yeah, I bet.
For me, yeah.
And two pretty special players, but two special men. What was it about them as people that made them different?
George and Stephen are a little different, but I would, for both men, if you draw on the similarities, is their attention to detail to their own preparation, regardless of what they did, whether that was preparing for a test match or a Super Rugby match, or taking the family on holidays, or going to a dinner. These blokes had the same traits and behaviours and mannerisms on everything. Always early, always smile on face, greeting everybody, going out of their way to help, talking to younger people, making an effort around not only their own presentation and professionalism, but how they were perceived, and more importantly, how people perceived them and how they interacted with everybody. And so I was fortunate enough to be personal friends with both those men and involved with their families, and I didn't see a difference in either guy in any setting. It was the same person. Yeah, so hadn't really thought about that till then, but as blokes, around how they go about their own being better every day philosophy, and constantly growing and learning and being a better human or a better version of themselves. And they always, they had some setbacks, no doubt, on and off the field. However, how they conducted themselves and how they, how they personified themselves as humans never ever changed.
I love that. It's I remember hearing from Wayne Goldsmith, the talent scout, and he was talking about like the difference between success and not for young athletes, and he talked about the important things around character and resilience and leadership and all these things are far more important than talent. And he said there's only like in 40 years, I think he rattled off 5 people's names that had both, like exceptional talent plus that same character, and that one of them was George Gregan. So he must have been incredible to work with, like, because it sounds like he was the whole package in a lot of ways.
Yeah, definitely. I've worked with Wayne and done a few things with him over the period of time. I think another iteration of that, done a little bit of work with All Blacks in the last sort of 24 months, and they have this three-pronged approach, very, very similar, and they call it courage, character, and craft. And for example, when they do their reviews, there might be not necessarily marking, but looking at a rating of 10 for each. So there's a mark of, say, 30 if you're looking at those three tilts. If I look at someone like George at his prime, he's close to a 30 out of 30. There's a typical guy who accepted whatever outcome, came back to process. His leadership style was right for the time too, like very standards driven, very behaviours driven, had actions also that, that no one will be better than me in my preparation and my attention to details. So set a benchmark, but also if you don't meet that, then he would hold you accountable. And, for those who follow rugby or been involved, the George Gregan death stare's famous,
Love it. You said it was the right leadership at the time, and things have certainly changed with young people and young athletes. And I know a lot of the people that listen to this podcast they're either coaches or teachers, or they have young people that they look after in some capacity. What is the leadership that works now? What has changed? Because they are a very different beast, the young people coming now.
Yeah. Well, I think I've been asked this a little bit actually, and I think the summary for me is, once again, it's a three-pronged approach. So a lot of work you do on podcasts here, and people that you speak to and the reading that you do, most leaders would have, I think, break it down to three key traits. The first one is a clear vision, and it doesn't matter if you're the captain of the under-10 soccer team or running a pool or a school or the managing partner of a legal firm, whatever that looks like. You're absolutely clear in what you're trying to achieve, but more importantly, you're bringing people along for the journey, and there's alignment around what that looks like. So I think that's really important with the vision, how they sell it, how they drive it, and how they bring people along. The second one is this self-awareness. Like, I think in modern day society, you need to have this air of vulnerability to you. You need to understand your strengths and weaknesses, and you need to be vocal about that. And you need to ensure that you're looking for support and people around you to bridge your gaps or your weaknesses. We focus on our strengths, but it's important that when we are short in areas that we're looking for someone. So I think great leaders, once again, regardless of age, level, whatever your profession is, that if there's a self-awareness, that's a strong trait in leaders, and that's easy to pick out. The third one is care. Like once again, it doesn't matter what field we are in. We are in the people business, whether it's a legal firm or a soccer game or whatever that is. Doesn't matter if you kick a footy, run a hockey stick. We are in the people business, so people are absolutely key. And I think, the old adage of, young people, they don't care how much you know, but they need to know how much you care. I think that's absolutely real these days. And with the care, it needs to be genuine. You can't be ticking boxes when you give a shit about someone. You have to be genuinely deep around what that looks like. And so we often talk about, in high performance environments with leaders, is there's high challenge but also high support, and they balance each other out. And if you have too much of one, then you're going to have a few cracks appear. So I think they would be the three things. So to answer your question, regardless of where you're at for leadership, if you're absolutely clear on what you're trying to do, you're aware of where you sit and your self-awareness, and you're deeply reflecting on how you get better. And then I think if you actually, there's genuine care around your people and what you actually do, then people will see that and want to follow that.
So good. So I particularly love the self-awareness piece, and you're saying that, you need to be able to be vocal about that, what you're good at, which people find really difficult, and to be also vocal about things that you're not so good at, which again, people find it really difficult to do. The thing you're not good at, I love that. Rather than necessarily trying to solve it, who can you bring in to your world to help with that? It's something that I learned probably about 12, 13 years ago. Like, I'm not great at detail.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to, lay out this really detailed process of all these different parts that I do, because I'm on the complete other side of the spectrum to that. And if anything, I've got worse at detail since I found that out. But the beauty of it is I've got better at the stuff that I am good at. And I think that's from what I've seen of high performance is you like not trying to be good at everything. Know what you're good at and really double down on it, right?
Oh, I think so, and I think it's interesting when you talk about, let's use the phrase strengths and weaknesses, but we obviously want to strengthen our weaknesses, but on the flip of that, while we're doing that, we don't want to weakness our strengths.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because, take every man over 50 at the moment. IT is not going to be something they're good at. And so this is where you rely on your kids or people around you to say, hey, you need to help me with this because I've got no clue here. And so accept that and just be vulnerable and then people understand that. So there's no point going to Webby around how to turn your app on your phone. He won't know because he's made it very clear. So but he trusts and relies on Ian to do that. So go to Ian. And so all of a sudden you've got these synergies in your group that work because the bloke up front's actually up front about what he's good at, what he's not.
Yeah, love that. And that's that vulnerability again, isn't it? Just to put your hand up and say, yeah, I'm owning this. I'm not fantastic at it, and that's actually okay.
Well, I think the modern day expects that now. Like when you and I were probably younger, it wasn't okay to be vulnerable. But now the people around us expect us to be that. And it's not genuine if we're not.
Yeah, spot on.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got the leadership there, the three things, the clear vision, making sure everyone's in alignment and driving it, the self-awareness, being vulnerable about what you are good at and what maybe not so good at, and that genuine care, because if you're trying to fake that, people are going to see straight through it. That's three things that most people that come on here say that's got to be what's in that the key parts of leadership. So rather than, we don't want to talk about necessarily people you're working with now, but is there someone that you've worked with in the past that maybe because you've worked with a lot of sort of high profile teams, is there someone there that maybe the rest of the world, media, etc., didn't necessarily consider a leader, but they were a fantastic leader in behind the scenes that just did the things that need to be done, but not necessarily got the accolades at that higher level?
Yeah, I think just trying to. A lot of teams or clubs you work with always have some leaders who aren't the best players and drive things like the culture and the alike. I was fortunate enough to spend a bit of time on Storm, the Melbourne Storm in the NRL this year, and one of the guys behind the scenes, one of the players that drives, always not alone, there's a group that drives it, but drives the off-field culture and drives the standards and behaviours, is Bronson Garlick, and he's not a regular starting player. He's the Garlic Pies guy and Sean Garlick's son, and whenever I went to a meeting, Bronson was always front and centre and very, very present, and had this presence about him that you knew he was a leader in that environment. So if you didn't know rugby league and walked in, you would say, well, this guy clearly is a leader in this group. And then other players that are have some names are part of that, but Bronson was very, very much a driver. So that's one example. I think in some of the teams that I've been involved with, the Wallabies, for example, when I first started, we had Michael Hooper as the captain. We had some senior players in James Slipper and Nick White. and Andrew Kellaway, but the guy that led the culture off the field, because not the bulk, but more than half of our group were Pacific Islanders, and was a guy called Alan Alatua. And Alan was a tight end from the Brumbies, and he was clearly a leader, a real spiritual guy that everybody absolutely respected. And he when he needed to be, he could be absolutely ruthless around how he did that too. So a huge amount of respect for a man who has since captained the Wallabies, to be fair, but as a behind-the-scenes leader. If you asked anybody in that Wallaby group, what does Alan do, and they will tell you that he runs the cutter off the field. Yep.
Oh, I love that. Interesting that you mentioned Bronson Garlick. I imagine he would have learned a lot of those principles growing up, having a dad playing at the highest level, but also like watching his dad in business, because nothing teaches leadership, whether it's by necessity or force, like being in business. So, I imagine he's learned a heap along the way from his old man.
Must have done, but an impressive man, and I don't think he plays a lot for them, but he's got a really, really important role, and it's valued highly.
No, yeah, it's good. What about if we just, because I know we've talked a lot about sporting teams, but you also do a lot of work in corporate. What are some of those principles that people, if they're listening, can take and apply to their everyday life? Not necessarily in work, not necessarily in sport, but just something that you know that you've witnessed or that you now teach that would be beneficial for someone who hasn't necessarily been exposed to those sort of high performance situations.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And it's taken me a little while to work this out, but in high performance sport, we have this application to us because that's the nature of the environment. And in what's really, really easily transferable to corporate or any other life is that there's certain traits of a high performer that you actually don't need any talent for. Yeah. And a lot of people call them NTRs or NTNs, no talent required, no talent necessary. And you can break those down that are applicable to your particular environment. But little things like turning up on time, walking into a room and shaking hands with everybody first so there's a connection, looking for solutions, making an effort in everything you do, being positive and proactive around your approach, tidying up after yourself, asking people if they need assistance, asking for assistance, whatever they may, making a contribution, no stupid question, looking for clarity, checking for understanding, challenging each other all the time. You don't need a PhD or a doctorate or a business degree to do any of that. And so you don't need any talent to do any of that either. You just need a bit of awareness, some application, and some discipline to do that. So that's the easiest thing that I could say to anybody. And I learnt this myself the hard way. Like I remember having to go to a meeting with a coach that I worked with, and we actually said, "Oh, would you like everybody to get coffee?" And so I went and got the coffee, and the meeting was due to start at 10, and I walked in at 10:02 with all the coffees, and the head coach wasn't in the meeting room. And so I said to the boys, "Well, where's the boss?" And they said, "Mate," he said, "because you're late, clearly the meeting wasn't important." So he walked out. And so what I learned, and now he didn't make me go get the coffees. What's more important, the meeting starts at 10. Why? And I was a senior position in this group. So I didn't think it was important. I thought the coffees were more important. So a real harsh lesson to learn, but that's high performance, and that didn't need any talent.
Yeah, wow. I love that.
What's important. When I tell people that story, that they believe you, but they think, shit, that's a bit harsh. And then when I meet people that were also in the room, I'll say, hey, these guys just reinforce that. Remember that meeting? And I can guarantee you, and I've worked with some of those blokes who are in that room since, no one's like, meeting.
Yeah, I bet.
And so I think little things like that, these NTRs or NTNs, whatever you like to call them, no talent required, no talent necessary, are really simple, high-performing traits that people don't necessarily do. But if they're important to you, it's really easy to hold them accountable. Hey, guys, we said the meeting at 10 was important. Is there a reason why it hasn't started at 10? Because I want to be a bloody good one. And if you haven't, if you weren't here, why didn't you tell us? So it comes down to that, mate. That's a bit of application and discipline around these traits,
Yeah, it's so good, and it also makes me think is how often that we, as a society, are quick to then go to make excuses and blame and all those sorts of things. Like you could have easily said, "Well, I'm getting the coffees for everyone," but what he's really pushed is, well, that's your responsibility, and you be there on time regardless.
That's it, and I really love that lesson is that often young people say it's not my fault. I didn't do that. Okay, we can have an argument about that if you want. Let's assume it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to make it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any others like setbacks? You just used a great example of probably not a setback, but a great learning experience. Have you had sort of setbacks along the way in the career? Like, could you think of one specific and then what you learned from it and how you dealt with it?
Yeah, I think it's when I was involved with the Australian equestrian team, which is the performance horse program in the Olympics. Yeah. And in the lead up to the first Olympic Games that I was involved with was Rio. We had a world championship every other 4 years, and it was my first sort of go at that. And we went to world championships, and we did poorly. And I remember the group sitting back and saying, not everyone will understand this. It's not in horse sports, but a lot of people saying, it's because we didn't have decent enough horses. Everyone's horses is better than ours. And I thought about that at the time, and I spoke to the group and I said, and I remember we were the other teams that we did poorly. The other teams were on the podium getting their medals, and I said to the group, listen, I'm feeling pretty ordinary here, and I want you to have a think about how you feel right now, because if we're going to continually blame our horses, we'll never, ever be on that podium. So it's up to us what we do as a group and you as individuals around your preparation. And so I looked at that setback, and since then we didn't miss a medal, but whether or not it was that drove it, but what it was this desire and message with the guys to say, it wasn't our horses that lost this, it was us. And so we need to be better at how we go about doing it. And by blaming the horses, is that as a group, we need to understand we'll never, ever accept that again. Yeah. So if your horses aren't good enough, go and get another one. Or tell me how you're going to make this one better. Let's not do that. So I think that was a great learning around standards and these above the line behaviours versus below the line behaviours. So we looked to blame, we looked for excuses, we weren't looking for solutions, and we weren't taking responsibility. So I felt I had to change that, and I had to change that myself, because when the guys were telling, I wasn't experienced enough with horse sports. When they were saying, our horses are good enough, I'm going, fair enough. I thought, well, hang on a minute. It took me a little while, but we fixed that. Yeah.
It's the same sort of messages of like blame the ref, blame the bounce of the ball, blame the weather, like any version of blame. I guess there is an element of them being able to control that, of like you said, let's get better horses and make sure it's not an excuse again. And that's again one you can apply across sport, work, everyday life. Like it's easier to find reasons why, but that doesn't help you get better.
Well, yeah, I think you're right, and I think we try to control the controllables,
of course,
and we can't control the uncontrollables. But what we can control is how we react to that.
Yeah.
Or how we respond to that. I think it's more of a better term, because reaction can sometimes be emotional, but a response is factual. And I like that, because we just get on with it. And I do a little bit of work in the agribusiness sector. And that sector's fantastic around this, because not one high performer will blame the weather or the climate conditions, because it's pretty easy. God hasn't rained for 10 years. What I have done is put all these processes and plans in place to mitigate that when that happens. So,
yeah, well, and that's like their livelihood and survival depends on them having those contingencies, right?
100%. It doesn't mean it's easy, because it's not. It's tough. However, the guys that survive and look for solutions are pretty identifiable.
Yeah, I know you're a country lad, as you said, and this part of your work is something that's really dear to your heart. So tell us a little bit about the work you're doing in agriculture, high performance agriculture. You said you told me a story last time we chatted about just how committed these guys are to being better.
I think, definitely. Like the people in the rural community have a work ethic that's significantly different to some of the people we might interact with day to day. So, and their lifestyle is obviously different to us. They don't get on a train and go to work because work's right there, So there's this balance of their lifestyle versus what they do professionally. I'm really lucky with some of the guys that I work with, is that there's obviously a connection to them, or they understand sport because they see it, and want to know why sporting teams are successful or not, or how you go about that day to day. Because and it's getting a bit different now with all these documentaries, but usually when we watch sport, it's what we see on a Saturday afternoon. It's not what we see the daily grind. And I work with a fantastic player, a guy called Richie Moanga, an All Black. We worked together in Japan, and his motto was, you can't cheat the daily grind. And if you do, you will not be successful. And I think I see that in these rural and agricultural high performers, is they understand they can't cheat. They're just the day-to-day, what they have to do to get the base, be brilliant at the basics. So I think that's one thing. I think when they can relate to sport, they know that they want to be better, and that they know that they can do more in everything that they do with their systems and the processes to be better. So if we look at outcome, they'll, I don't know, sell their bulls, or they'll harvest their wheat. The outcome is, well, that is what it is. If I put my processes and systems that take not 6 to 9 months to grow the wheat, if I do everything I possibly can to put it in the best possible environment to be the best crop I can ever grow, that's where they drill down and look at. They don't look at, I hope it rains and we'll see how we go in 6 months. They're out there every day looking at how they can check that. And that's not cheating the daily grind,
Yeah, spot on. You mentioned before around leadership, having that vision.
Yeah.
How much time and energy do you spend on your personal vision for your life and for your business? Because this is something that, for people starting out with me, is one of the first projects, is having their own game plan for their life, having that vision, having the steps they need to take. How important do you see that for what you do? Just like, yes, in what you do in work, but just in how you live.
It's pretty cool. I think of it all the time. I'm constantly reflecting on it. I'm constantly reflecting on the day, how it relates to that. I preview every day, I review every day, and it all relates back to that. It doesn't mean that the goals don't change and adjust.
Yeah.
I don't think the core principles of what I'm trying to achieve, or who I work with, varies much. That's pretty locked. But we do challenge and tinker with the edges a bit. But it's something I think about and talk about all the time. And I think, people that are around you, alignment's key, right? When we walk into environments, we look and listen for alignment. So if I'm going to preach that, and even if someone walks in this door or we shake hands, I'll make it very, very clear what I'm about. And what I'm trying to achieve, so that they can either help me with it, or they're aligned with what I'm trying to do. And whether I mean to do it or not, or a discipline to do it, it's probably a habit now that it is front and centre in everything we do. I don't necessarily have what I'm trying to achieve written on a wall because I don't necessarily believe in that. I've worked for plenty of organisations that have these fantastic buzzwords on a wall, but don't live any of them.
Yeah.
And I think I don't want somebody to walk in this room and see a sign that says what I'm doing. I want them to see me living it, and I think that's what I'm trying to drive with people that I work with. Well, one, because it's a bit more enjoyable for me.
Yeah, and I think the more you do it, the more that vision does become a moving beast, and we need to constantly make those adjustments. I love how you said there that, you know, like how conscious you are of these in the day-to-day. They've just become a habit, because I think that's the important place to get to, right? One of the things I get people to do is have a daily journal and record your wins, and like you said, review what's been, like, what have you learned, what still needs attention, maybe just asking some questions about what's going on at the moment where you don't know the answer. Are they strategies that you use specifically? Like, are you physically writing this when you say you preview and review your day?
Yeah, I do, because that's how I learn. I listened to a podcast actually the other day of a rugby coach guy called Chris Webb, who does it when he's in the car, and I was thinking, should I do that? But I don't do it in the car because I can't write it down. And he said, but I don't need to write it down because that's how I learn, that's how I respond. And I thought, oh, thank goodness he said that, because I'm thinking, shit, how am I going to do that in the car? And so, yeah, I do, because that's a me thing. I you know, even yesterday, I think I told you I was speaker. I've been involved with the Broncos. We went to Newcastle yesterday, watched the Knights, and I had my notebook and I'm writing some stuff down in the warm-up, and the CEO of the Broncos said, do you carry that everywhere you go? And I was thinking, shit, yeah, I do. I do actually. I don't know if that's a good look or not, but that's my style of learning. So yes, I write everything down. I review that constantly. Sometimes I challenge myself because I can't read my own bloody writing, but but so if that's what's important to me. Yeah, I think you talk about habits, and most people would have heard of the book Atomic Habits, written by James Clear, and he. It's not for everybody, that book, and not everything in the book is for everybody, but some key points around habit stacking, habit looping, and habit creating is pretty key in there, and writing things down is an easy way to start.
Yeah, it is. Well, I think it's just, I remember learning from Jim Rohn, is it like it makes it truth when you write it down. It sets it in your subconscious as something that is. So I don't think it. I'm going to guess that guy was actually saying that in a complimentary way. Do you carry that everywhere? Because I think that shows discipline, right?
Yeah, well, I think, and what he said to me after is he actually said, we were having a conversation, and he was busy. He was a CEO, and they had people around him, and he actually went, so can you just write down for me to make sure for that guy? And so all of a sudden there was this connection of, inadvertently he could trust me and I could trust him to work together, and we've only worked together a short period of time, but I think I think you're right. It was a compliment, and he actually used it later. And I texted him this morning to say, I didn't even know who the bloke was. Don't forget to contact the fellow with the blue jacket.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's good. Just a little thing where you said on tech. There are so many good voice-to-text apps out there now, Webby, so you'll have to have a look at that, or get one of your children to show you. So if you do come up with an idea in the car.
I feel so inadequate when people, the whole, I'll pull the plug out and start again.
Yeah, spot on. Hey, clearly you've had opportunities drop in your lap along the way, but you would have manufactured some, and you would have, like, they would have been the result of legwork and connections and so on. What's the best advice for people who are looking to further themselves in their career? How can they generate more opportunities for their growth, whether it's a connection here that leads to something around like what they might be able to do in the future, or a new job opportunity, or a new connection?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I know what not to do. And I remember someone telling me, actually, I mentioned it to a young man the other day, and he repeated it back to me this morning. Never tread on the toes that belong to the legs that are attached to the arse that you might have to kiss later on.
Love it.
And so, and he said to me, you told me that, and I laughed and didn't know what it meant, and I realised what it was. And so we talked about that and how he learned from that. So that's probably what not to do. I think what to do is, I work with a fantastic old mentor, a guy called David Brockhoff. And Brock was he was the captain and the coach of the Wallabies in the 60s and 70s, and he became a mentor of mine over a long, long period of time. And he used to say, he never called me Webby or Chris, he always called me Webb. He said, Webb, be yourself, be fair, and be consistent. And I think when you're looking to drive connections, then that's probably the best advice I've ever had, and not trying to be something that you're not. And he operated in a world where there was no LinkedIn or anything like that. So now we've got LinkedIn and podcasts and all these kind of things, but I always come back to, if I'm being fair and being consistent, being myself, what Brock told me, then if I see something on LinkedIn that I don't necessarily agree with, then why would I charge into someone over that? Because that's not me. And same with a podcast is, I could probably, I don't know, talk about things I don't know about, but that's not me, and that's not being consistent, and that's not being fair. So I think, it's not, you're not asking me to produce a life lesson here. You're asking me how do people connect, keep going. But I think that's one. I think connection and which is a bit of a funny word, but once again, if you're out trying to be the best you can be, once again, we're in the people business, and we rely on people to help us be the best we can be. And so if we're not treating people the way they want to be treated, then we're not going to be as successful as where we could be. And people often say, treat people the way you want to be treated. The next level is treat the way they want to be treated. And I think, to answer your question, is be fair, be consistent, be yourself, treat people the way they want to be treated, and always connect. And I learned a lesson around this connection piece. I remember I first worked with a coach, a guy called Dave Rennie, and he said, I want everybody in this team, regardless of where we're at, every time we see each other in the morning, you need to walk up and shake each other's hands. And the reason why we do that, we made breakfast twice as long because everyone had to hop up and shake each other's hands. But the reason why we do that is that I might wake up and have a great morning. I've got the best car park, my coffee's hot, my wife looks beautiful, the kids are getting A's, I'm feeling fantastic, and I walk in. And you might not have had the best day. You might have missed your best car park spot, spilled coffee all over yourself, kids are late to school, whatever that looks like. So you're not in the same headspace I'm in. Yet if you just walk past me, I might say, I wonder what's wrong with Ian. Was it something I did? Is everything okay? So I've created this anxiety purely because of an uncertain notion. Whilst if day to day, regardless, it is a standard that I walk up to you and shake your hand and look you in the eye and say, how are you going? I've removed this uncertainty. And if our relationship's strong enough and you feel comfortable, you can say, hey, mate, I've had a bit of a shit morning, actually. Can you just keep an eye out for me? well, actually, I don't rip them, mate, so no problem. You know, so as funny as a bit, fluffy as that sounds around connection, I learned a shit ton from that alone. And in an environment where there's lots of people, that little connection piece really sets you up nicely for the day, as opposed to 40 anxious people running around because they're uncertain. So I try to practice that wherever we go, is that here's a behaviour or a standard that we're going to place straight away. Regardless of what we do, we shake hands every day. I worked with a veterinary practice one day, and the guy came out. He'd just finished a surgery and he had shit all up his arm, and he said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And it was in front of everybody else. So I did. And it was shit all over my hand and everything, but that's the power of it, right? So everybody saw that. We don't break this standard. This is what we do as a group.
Love that. Yeah, so good. That connection piece reminds me of a good friend of mine, also a coach. She used to work in construction, and she's organising them for their jobs for the day. But what she found over time is what she was really doing was creating a safe place for big blokey men to come in the morning and just chat and to talk about some of the things they had going on in their life. And it was kind of one of the catalysts for her to realise that she needed to get more into that space, because they were so happy because they had that space. They were so happy because they could go there, and then they knew that it was somewhere they could just have a coffee, chill out for a bit and talk about anything really. And I know if you're in a workplace and you're not getting that opportunity, you need to find yourself in a space where you can do that, right? And that's why sport's always been so meaningful for all of us, because it creates that automatically. But sometimes we do need to put in a bit of effort to manufacture that too.
Yeah, I think so. I heard that beautifully defined the other day, is that, obviously the technical term, or the psychological term, is psychological safety, when actually someone phrased it as psychological freedom. And it's a reiteration of the words, but there's a safe place and then there's a place of freedom, and I really love the difference in that. Because safe sometimes can be seen as a little bit risk averse, whilst if I'm free and I've got this sense of freedom, then it's okay if I come back to vulnerability or take a couple of risks, because I'm free to do that because people trust me. I really enjoyed that difference in the phrasing.
Yeah, so good. I also love what you said there about the treating people. We grow up with this, treat people how you want to be treated, but it needs to be that next level, because we're all different. I remember when I started learning more about profiling and how different people operate and different needs and so on, and one of my children saying to me, "Oh, you treat me different," and I'm like, "Yeah, I do," and I think that was an important moment for both of us, because you're like this, and your sister's like this, or your brother's like this, or whoever it was, I can't remember, and it's like, we have to match people on their needs, not trying to. This never going to be completely even. We can try to, but the best way to do it is just to find out how someone operates and connect in that way.
Yeah, it's really, it's great, isn't it? And I remember how this got explained to me, is that it's a bit like going to your kid's school and say, "Listen, guys, if we score 3 goals today, I'll shout you all an ice cream." and 2 of the kids go, "I'm actually lactose intolerant." We go, "Well, that's not going to work." Right. So there's that, if I treated them the way I want to be treated, we'll all be eating ice cream. but if I did that, then I'd have 2 sick kids and we'd be off to the hospital. So all of a sudden, we've got to reward and treat people the way they want to be treated. And okay, we can't have an ice cream. That's fine. None of us will have an ice cream, but we will have these gluten-free brownies that will absolutely make us feel fantastic. So whatever.
Yeah, it's a great metaphor. Chris, is there anything else that you want to share, just around a life lesson or something that people can take away and apply to their day-to-day before we wrap up?
I think I had some great advice work for a guy, and still do actually. We do a bit of work together. A guy called Frank Dick. Frank is a Scottish guy who was the former head coach of the Great Britain Olympic athletics team for a long, long period of time. Coached guys like Seb Cohen and Dally Thompson to gold medals, multiple gold medals. Lovely, lovely, lovely guy. And he used to define high performance as this. So when you're working with people, ask 3 questions. And the first one was, what do you want? And he used to think it was funny by referring to the Spice Girls and say, what do you really, really want? Which I always thought was funny because he kept saying that all the time. What do the Spice Girls do? So number one, what do you really, really want? And the second one is, how much is that going to cost? And that's not financial. So we have to make some decisions here if we want to achieve what we're trying to achieve or what we want to achieve. So that's the second question: is what are you prepared to give up? What's the price there? And then the third one is, are you prepared to pay it? And so I look at advice and I talk to high performers. And we talk before we even get to goal setting, all these other things. It's pretty simple. Tell me what you really, really want, whatever that is. I want to win the grand final, or we want to turn over $1 million, or whatever that is. Okay, well, I'm clear on that. I understand that. Now, what's it going to cost to get that? Oh, we're going to have to get 2 more players, or I don't know, we're going to have, whatever we're going to have to generate our sales to twice the pipeline, or whatever that is. Okay, well, so that's a decision. We need to make a few choices here. And the third one is, tell me if you're committed to do it. Because then we can put some structures and frameworks around you to help support you what you do. So are you prepared to pay the price? And so my advice to anyone that wants to live this, high performance element to whatever you do, that's a really simple 3 rule of thumb to write in your funny little notebook straight up.
Yeah, exactly. And that third question, I mean, they're all important questions, but that third one is the most powerful, is that are you prepared to pay the price? And I remember, coming to personal development, high performance, whatever way you want to put it, coming to that later in life, and that was one of the questions, or similar questions that continued to be put to you, like, what are you prepared to do? And it's like, well, the alternative is to go back how I was living before, and that's not realistic. Yeah. So I guess I'm prepared to pay whatever price.
And I think once you make that commitment, once you ask that question, we say, okay, well, what does success look like? How do we do that? Then we've got a reference point to hold each other accountable. Yeah. So, hey, on Friday, then you told me that you wanted to do this, but the things that we put in place, you haven't done since. So has that changed? Or because in order to hold you accountable and you hold me accountable, I need to make sure you're actually going to do this. So the commitment piece is a really important one. And if we're aligned on what that looks like, then we can hold each other accountable to that. Then here's this psychological freedom or safe place where I can actually say, hey, mate, I'm not having a crack at you. I'm just saying that's what we agreed. And you haven't done that, or I haven't done that. So I'm sorry, mate. We're going to have to chip back in again and have another crack,
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that commitment. It's, again, I reference the game plan training that where I start people, and that's one of the tasks is you need to write a commitment to yourself. Because
great little story.
Go.
Sorry, mate. Great little story that someone told me in the agri-business sector is around commitment and contribution. So the farmer comes out and says to all his animals, I'm going to have bacon and eggs for my breakfast this morning. And the pig sort of puts his head down and wanders off to the corner, and the chooks keep jumping around, and the chook runs over the pig and says, hey, what's wrong with you? He said, well, it's all right for you. You only have to make a contribution. I have to make a full commitment. So I thought it was a really great story,
Yeah, it's good. Well, thankfully, we don't have to make that sort of blood commitment, but but it is so important. Webby, mate, thank you so much for coming on. So much wisdom and gold for people to take away from this one. I appreciate it, mate.
No, thank you, mate. I've met a couple of times and learn every time I talk to you, so I really love the conversation, and thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome, mate. Cheers.
Good on you, mate.
That wraps up today's episode with Chris Webb. And what a great reminder of the kind of leadership that actually moves the needle. As you reflect on this conversation, think about how these insights can shape your own life game plan. The power of a clear, aligned vision, not just for your work, but for your life. Building the self-esteem to own your strengths and weaknesses without ego. Leading with genuine care and creating real impact, not just ticking boxes. Staying committed, consistent, and treating people how they need to be treated. If you're ready to turn these ideas into action, that's exactly what my game plan training is designed to help you do. It's built for high performers who want clarity, structure, and momentum in all areas of life, sport, business, and beyond. Now over to you. You've taken the time to listen to this whole episode. Now it's time to take action. Commit to one thing you've learned today and make it happen. And to avoid any obstructions, join the Sport is Life movement by clicking on the link in the show notes.